Okay. Well, welcome to today's webinar, which is introducing SocEnv's Soils Management Hierarchies. So if you've got any questions today, please pop them in the Q&A. So you'll either see it at the bottom of your screen, or you might just need to click on the More, and then you'll find it under there. So Jonathan's joined us today, and he's going to give us a presentation, and we've got a couple of polls throughout the session, and we're going to end with our Q&A. So if you've got any questions, do please pop them in. So Jonathan's joined us today to talk to us about the frameworks and how these tools can help manage soils sustainability. So Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Would you like to introduce yourself and kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jonathan Atkinson. I currently work part-time for Clare, an organisation some of you may know that's been around for several years. Prior to joining Clare in 2022, I worked for the Environment Agency from when it was born from the Waste Regulation Authorities and NRA back in mid-90s. And prior to that, I did a bit of voluntary work overseas in various countries like the Philippines and Papua New Guinea, so a bit of a world traveller as well. But throughout my career, I've always been interested in the environment and the impact we have on the environment and the impact the environment has, as depending on which section of it you look at, on other bits of the environment. And so always been interested in soils. I did a degree in environmental science at Plymouth many moons ago and followed that with a engineering diploma, postgrad engineering diploma in soil and water engineering at the National College of Agricultural Engineering, as it was at the time, at Silso, which is now part of Cranfield University. So soil's always been close to my heart. And I was very glad to be involved with the SocEnv work through the Soil and Stones group. So we will be covering some of the development and reporting that's been done by that group over the last few years since we first kicked it off. And that's what the thing is about today. But before we kick off into my presentation, shall we just share a couple of poll questions just to get things flowing? And we're just interested in the projects or teams that you're involved with. When do you consider excavated materials that might arise on a project? And so we'll just start off with these couple of poll questions before we go into my presentation. So if you see the poll on your screen, please do click on answers and let's see what the experience of our audience today has in relation to soils management. We'll just give it a few minutes while everybody joins that, and then we can see the result of that first poll, hopefully. Right, what does that show? Right, so a bit of a mixed picture, but glad to see that people are considering it and beginning to think about it a little bit earlier in the process than perhaps was done in the past. But it's a concern that there are some folk there who've never been involved with it. That may be because of a particular specialism, but given the audience of today and the professional body that we're talking to today, I'm very interested in the fact that some people have said never that soil's not considered very much. Let's close that one and just ask the second one, if we may. So in terms of project management of excavated materials, do you use materials management tools such as, for instance, the Definition of Waste Code of Practice or Soil Passport Code of Practice, as we're soon to be renaming it officially? Have people come across that process? Do you use it? Have you got contractors that use it? Are you aware of it? Be helpful to sort of know from my point of view what the general feel is, what the background knowledge is before we kick off into the presentation. So hopefully that's given everybody an opportunity to click on their preference there, and we can close that and see what the result is. So Yeah, still quite a few of you who've never used it or come across it. So maybe well worthwhile thinking of attending one of the DAOCOP training events to enhance your knowledge about Soil's passport management scheme. But that's very helpful. Okay, let's close that and then we'll go into our main presentation. And hopefully this will, everybody can see the screen and
Yep. You're all good, Jonathan.
we're all good. Okay, and I can move forward through the process. Right, so originally my colleague from Waits, who's the chair of our Soil and Stones group at SocEnv project, was going to join me for today. But unfortunately, he's been well overnight, so he's called off today. And you've just got me. But hopefully, we will have an interesting session. If I can get the slides to move, which is they're not seeming to do. They were doing it very well earlier on. What's going on now? Can you still see the main screen?
Yes.
Okay, entirely sure why. Ah, there we go. It's
Oh, okay.
now working, so we're good. Right. Okay. So just a sort of bit of background on Society for Environment. It's a not-for-profit umbrella body that has a royal charter, so can grant chartered status to those individual professional bodies that form part of it. It's been a really good envelope body for us all as individual members of different organisations to come together, not because it just represents a bigger slice of society in the professional body network, but also because it gives opportunities for interactions. And so we have right across the board 28 professional bodies licensed by SocEnv to award chartered environmentalist status. And we also have the opportunity to award registered environmental practitioner and registered environmental technician. And there's over 8,500 of various different grades of that membership, which is really great. But as I say, the big thing is that it brings together across those sectors and bodies a huge range of individuals who can contribute jointly to interdisciplinary and collaborative work. And you can see the sort of nature of some of the folk that we have involved. And it's always a pleasure to talk to people slightly outside your own sector, your own area of specialism, and gain an insight. Because, I mean, that's what the environment basically is all about, isn't it? Is that there is a requirement for us to understand more than just our own siloed expertise. And the Soil and Stones group particularly has been really benefiting from drawing on lots of different experts in different fields. So by using that aspiring network, we have come up with a sort of, strap line, if you like, or a key objective to safeguard soils and soil related materials for use and reuse. So our group is commonly known as SANS, or Soil and Stones Group. We've got three key aims: to advocate for policies that value soil and stones, which is somewhat missing in the formal agenda. To shape and share good practice so that there's more consistency in the approach that we have to managing soils and using the right tools for managing soils, whether that's in situ or excavated soils in one way, shape, or form. But also key to that, and key to those first two aims really, is forging the right connections to facilitate collaborative working, and therefore collaborative outcomes that are interdisciplinary and make a little bit more sense in the wider ecosystem world that we work in. And it fits together with those sustainable development goals that we all know and love by now. Certainly across the built environment and infrastructure, land management, forestry, agriculture, resource management, and also not forgetting the water side of things that interact with soil so much. We do really sort of bring from our different areas of expertise something that can make a bigger common good, as it were. So the opportunity to work with the soils group has been really good, and this UN soils diagram really sort of identifies some of those sort of key highlights and interactions and how really important soils are, despite the fact that they're missing from the legislative framework and policy framework in many instances, still, certainly in the United Kingdom anyway. Things are moving on across Europe and across other nations like Australia and New Zealand and so on. But certainly in the UK, we still feel that soils are missing the policy and legislative envelope that they need to really sort of force people to take a slightly better view of it. But there's a lot of work being done over the last 10 years in all arenas, really, that sets the scene for how important soils are to us all. Not just about resource management in terms of, the sort of physical sector of winning aggregates from ground materials and stuff, but just more understanding the links with nature and biodiversity and the importance of soil has. But from a medical point of view, a lot of our antibiotics arise from study of soil microorganisms, but also the benefits that good, healthy soil can bring to all our endeavours, whether they're agricultural for food raising, whether it's related to water management in catchments, water quality, as well as flow, or whether it's related to some of the responses that our landscapes make to climate change, whether that's severe droughts or whether it's sort of flood and heavy rain events. All of these things are challenges that we face, but they're challenges that we face, if you like, with the common ground, that we need to understand our soils better to be able to address those challenges. So analysing the issues and providing relevant case studies and signposting to good quality guidance, and maybe prompting government to sort of think about key policy recommendations is something the Soil and Stones Group has been urgently pushing for. And we started that in our first report in 2021, having first met in 2019, just before COVID struck. Managed to keep through the wonderful tools that we developed in COVID, like this Zoom platform and others, keep the group going. And we published the report in 2021. And alongside that, in a couple of years later, as we reviewed the ongoing response to that report, we decided we'd publish 10 principles to give soils a sort of maximum view and challenge policymakers to think about the key elements and objectives of what we'd looked at as to how to preserve, remediate, enhance natural soils as living systems rather than just muck away stuff that you dig out of the ground when you've got a development. But also to think about hierarchies of options for how you manage soils, stones and dredgings to maximum benefit, really. And highlighting the value soil and soils forming materials have and should really be considered in all land use developments from an earlier point of view, not just sort of the last knockings of when somebody's going to dig them out and take them away for disposal, which is the old historical mechanism by which certainly excavated materials were dealt with. So we wrapped all of this up in 10 principles and issued those in 2023. And we were subsequently asked to give evidence at the soil health inquiry, and Martin represented our group and provided that oral evidence, and we provided some additional written evidence subsequently as well. And I point you to the outcome of that the outcome report from that inquiry, and looking at the recommendations that were made, which are similar and have been repeated since by the Office of Environmental Protection in relation to soil, and how important this is really to our proposals to engage all communities a little bit better with how we manage soils and think about soils. We took that further forward in our triennial review. The first triennial review we undertook and issued another report in 2024, which was sort of looking back at what the recommendations were in 2021 and what we'd said and the calls for action, and highlighted really that we were still a little bit far off from some issues of being able to implement 10 principles of good soils and stones management and see those in action across the board in different sectors. And it was really, again, recognizing that there was still this lack of legislative base for soils protection in all arenas and sectors. And really, we were providing a further call to action through engaging in collaboratively with people from different sectors and different professional bodies to look at how we might all view soil, think about soil, and manage soil, but by understanding it better. So that was published, and really one of the sort of outcomes of that was saying clearly yet again that, what is soil health? What's it all about? Can we have a common indicator of soil health? There's been moves towards that in more recent years in the most recent environmental improvement plan, and particularly in the agricultural sector. and across Europe as well with the new soil health monitoring law that's come in under as a directive across the European frame, and really looking and pushing again for soil and stones to have the same legal status as air, water, and biodiversity. And as we move through into the circular economy frame, resource efficiencies as well. But very much looking at defining that approach on a risk-based frame rather than just a sector silo-based frame. Because I think everybody who's engaged with soils, and certainly ecologists, not least amongst those, recognizing that soils are very different in different landscapes, in different settings, in different land uses. And you can have large-scale maps and national assessments of land quality, but actually, when you get down to it, you've still got to look at soils very much on an individual site basis and take account of their landscape and the topography and so on and so forth. If we're going to assess the ecological health of soils and their functionality in helping manage some of the wicked problems that we face as climate change challenges us as a society to think about things in a slightly more pragmatic and practical way, perhaps, than we have in the past, rather than just going for growth and maximizing outputs without really considering the impact on the environment. So really sort of promoting that natural capital approach and sustainable economic growth rather than just growth for the sake of growth, recognizing the challenges that we face otherwise in a world that is significantly changing and one that is a global ecosystem as much as anything else. So one of the outcomes from this and the collaboration that we had with the organisation called Middle E, which is the Midlands Land Quality Group, that was set up predominantly by Murray Environmental folk a few years ago, and we had a workshop with them. And one of the outcomes of that was can we develop a tool that helps people understand soils better from the different sectors, understand who's doing what, and understand what the good practice guidance is available out there. So we developed this silo to soil tool, and SocEnv hosts that on their website. And that identifies the organisations involved in different soil management aspects across the sectors of the natural environment, the managed environment, and the built environment. And it pinpoints and highlights and signposts to good practice guidance from across the different jurisdictions. And then we launched that on the SocEnv website in April 2025. If you haven't come across it, I do recommend it to you. It's a really useful tool to sort of get a broader understanding of who's doing what out there. And some of the key players in pushing things forward, like the Lancaster Soils Task Force, and Sustainable Soils Alliance, and various others like the Landscape Institute, are increasingly have been focusing on soils and soil health and soil functionality, alongside the work that's been done by government on soil monitoring and trying to come up with parameters for soil health, for instance. So really useful tool, and as I say, I recommend that to you. It's available on the website. I'm sure many of you will be aware of these facts, so I'm not going to go through them bit by bit, but it does reiterate yet again how much we rely on soil and yet how little care we've given it over the years. And there's wonderful case studies from all across the planet, from the terra preta studies in the Amazon to regenerative agricultural case studies across particularly the States and America, and the Serengeti rules developed by the Savory Institute in Africa about livestock management and so on, relating to the mechanisms that operate in the savannas of Middle Africa. All of these things are well known, and yet we still lack an understanding, and quite often it is because people push it away from legislation or policy. Oh, it's too complicated, it's too difficult to get a handle on. Britain itself has over 700 different soil types just naturally occurring. You add in all the sort of management that has changed those types and changed the functionality of soil, and you add in the contamination aspects that have come out of our industrial emissions and the impact of contamination into the soil from brownfield sites, etc. It is a complex area, but it's one that we really do need to address because we're degrading our soils internationally, and the UK has one of the most degraded soil landscapes across Europe, and we really do need to sort of make an effort. And across Europe, there's lots of folk that have been involved with European projects that have mapped soil erosion and mapped soil degradation and so on and so forth. And we all understand and can see the poor picture that's out there. But what we do need to now come to get grips with is how we can all collaboratively work together to make sure things happen differently. We've got to stop dealing with it as just a sort of muck away job on development sites or something that we operate in for, productive modern agriculture that's throws chemicals at problems, because that seems to be the maximum cheapest way of getting maximum production for the supermarkets to reduce their prices, etc., etc. All of these interactions between society and social norms and economic norms and growth agendas and sustainable development or otherwise all implicate how we manage soils. So it really is something that we need to get our heads around a little bit better. So one of the challenges that we gave ourselves in the 2024 report was to sort of provide a soil management hierarchy for how you think and manage soils. And we ended up across our sectors deciding that we needed to have two respective settings, because there's clearly a different frame for agricultural and rural settings as there is to the urban and built environment. Although many crossovers, of course, in terms of how soil functionality is managed or is desired to be managed. But we wanted to try and identify some high-level points of interest based on the impact various actions have on soil health and resource opportunity and ecosystem services, for instance. And really, they were just designed to assist users at all levels in terms of government policy making, but also individual operators and project level in determining the most sustainable approach to managing soils as early as possible in project design or resource strategies, to ensure that we sort of think about soils and understand them better earlier. So these were the two hierarchies that jointly the SocEnv SOUNDS group came up with. The preference, obviously sort of mirroring the waste management hierarchy, with the preference being, if we possibly can, to leave soils alone, leave them in situ, understand them and manage them appropriately for what we want to, how we want to interact with them on a particular project or a particular land use. If you have to excavate them, then manage that excavation process carefully and in a phased manner, rather than just doing a complete on-site strip and chucking it all in a stockpile at the back where it's not very well looked after and it runs off into the local drainage schemes, roads or streams. And really sort of managing materials better if we have to excavate. And if we do have to excavate, then ensuring that material is reused rather than just transferred for disposal at a relevant landfill site. Either on site if possible, or at a separate development site or habitat creation site off site. But thinking about soils and their type and functionality, and using mechanisms like the DAO-COP to enable that materials reuse off site if materials have to be moved off site. We're very much pushing DEFRA to respond to its environmental improvement plan objective stated in the 2023 version of that, to create regional soil hubs or depots or earth banks, as we prefer to call them, to enable that sort of better beneficial use of materials that are surplus on one site but might be beneficially used elsewhere. And ultimately, if materials have to go for disposal, then they are used beneficially even in the disposal sites, as lining materials or capping materials or daily cover and restoration soils for minerals and waste sites particularly. So that was the urban sort of built environment one. We've also got one for rural settings, where again, it's very much working alongside the sort of regenerative agricultural approach and the rewilding approach that's been evident in lots of projects up and down the country now. And one of the ones that really struck me from a few years back when I was working down in the southeast is the Knepp estate. If you haven't had a chance to go and visit Knepp or watch the film or read the book Wilding, then do. It's got a wonderful chapter on soil and soil health and what soil is all about and all the wonderful creatures that inhabit soil if we look after it and manage it appropriately. But this whole sort of perspective that however we interact with soil, there are implications, and therefore we need to sort of understand that interaction better, manage that interaction better, and think about how soil can benefit us, not just in terms of producing food or producing forestry crops or whatever, but also in terms of its landscape impact in helping us to manage water flow and water quality, and the biodiversity net gain and nature recovery as well. So all of these things interact with this capping layer, if you like, that we have on the world that we live on. And we need to understand it and manage it a little bit better than we have in the past. So yeah, there's your rural settings one. So the challenges is still, can we introduce relevant planning policy at all levels that cover sustainable soil management, whether that's in habitat policies, local area plan policies, or individual planning permissions about sustainable soils management? How do we interact with that soil management hierarchy, trying to push us back as project managers and designers to whether you're designing a new, employment zone, or whether you're designing a residential building site, or whether you're designing a habitat creation scheme, or whether you're designing a landscape catchment management plan. How do we think about soils in all of those sorts of contexts? And how do we manage soil if we're going to have to interact with it and actually excavate or move it? Where does the soil ecosystem feature in BNG assessments and planting schemes and so on and so forth? In the years I was with the EA, I was involved with lots of different projects where, we addressed contamination risks, and we, created brownfield developments or infrastructure developments that required landscape planting. But too often the landscape considerations were about what type of plants would it look good on a particular landscape, on a particular development, rather than what sort of plants suit the soil conditions that we have on that particular development, and how do those plantings interact with the wider environment surrounding that development and the nature implications of habitat connectivity around and between environment developments, etc. So lots to sort of think about and learn from past experience. But how can we weave a better understanding of soil health into things like nature-based solutions that are now coming more and more to the fore in sort of flood management for catchments and flood management for rivers and watercourses and so on. So trying all of us to collaboratively influence government policy and see that we see the sort of things that we need finally coming into legislative policy and legislation. So we've seen what's happened in the EU in last couple of years, the signing off of the EU Soil Monitoring Directive and the science and robust assessments that are going on behind that. And certainly in this country, the same is now beginning to be looked at in a little bit more detail. But we really do need that legislative driver. So we're challenging government to recognise the importance of soil, set that legislative frame appropriately and soon, and have a bit more cross-department joined up thinking on policies that affect soil health, soil use and soil security, so that the regulations that come out or new guidance and policy that comes out is actually aligned better across government. And we had a really good example of that last year where the Treasury and HMRC got together to sort of discuss a new element of landfill tax changes, and across industry and across the professional bodies, there was a huge pushback on, do you realise the implications of these, what might seem simple changes to the financial systems, will mean to the beneficial reuse and management and use of both primary and secondary resources. So that was fortunately sort of pushed back, and a wider and better understanding perhaps undertaken across different departments to bring in the changes that did come in, and the proposals for further engagement and discussion going into the future. But it is that cross-sector thinking and cross-department thinking that we need to encourage, and really fully implement the targets that were in the original 2023 Environmental Improvement Plan with regards to soil. And it's really encouraging to see the Office of Environmental Protection continue to challenge government on soils, particularly about needing to do something more than they are currently doing if we expect to meet the targets that were set for in the 25-year environment plan, and the targets that we have before us to do certain things by 2030, or else our future is jeopardized in terms of a higher risk setting, particularly related to climate change issues. So lots of useful background reading that we can highlight for you, and I would encourage you, if you don't understand the definition of waste or soil passport scheme that's going to be coming into play, get your head around that. Look at the reports that have been done by those groups like Lancaster Soils Task Force, the BSSS working soil guidance for development and construction sites, the work that Sustainable Soils Alliance is doing across agricultural forums, and the work that a lot of players are now doing across soil management and habitat restoration projects, also linked to carbon credits and soil carbon, which are an increasing focus on industry, academic research as well. Lots of really good stuff. If you get a chance to go to the BSSS annual conference, I think the next one is in December up in Aberdeen this year. The breadth and width of our academic research into soils is just shown by that conference in huge detail, and it's really wonderful to see how much is being done. But once again, we need to sort of make sure that folk are aware of what's being done and what research is being done and how that research can be brought into practical implications, and actual performance on the ground in projects. So I do encourage you to read around the topic, and I think some of the work that your own organisation publishes is stupendous, and we just need to collaborate a little better perhaps across the board. So that's me. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we'll go to the next two polls, and then perhaps we can have the Q&As. So, bit of an open question here, but just to sort of see what folks say so that we can collate information for our future push on what we should be covering in legislation and policy, and challenges we can make to government departments on those. Is there good guidance out there that you use? Is there guidance that you think could be updated and improved? Just give us an indication. Give people a few seconds to scribble in their answers there, and we can see what the response is. Okay, what have we got? Oh. Need to... Excuse me a second while I plug my computer in before it shuts down. Right. So that gives us a not helpful response, but it looks like people do use.
Well, one person answered, it said none at all. So hopefully lots of what you've talked about today will inspire them to go and have a little look around at different materials. And we've got someone else who I think has put the COP, WCOP.
Right, hopefully that's the code of practice. As I say,
Yeah.
if you want a quick sort of stepping stone to what key guidance is out there, go to the Silo to Soils tool on the SocEnv website. Right, let's just run that last poll, get that out of the way, and then we can go to Q&A. Are you involved with the use of soil resource management plans? Now, this is slightly different to what I do day to day. This is not about the DALCOP, the soil passport scheme. These are about the soil resource plans that are done by ecologists and others to sort of see how soil can be managed from the ecological point of view. So I'd be intrigued to know what your response to this particular question is. This was flagged to us by, I think, David Hackett, one of our members in the SANS group, as we try to sort of develop some templates for good soil management plans and working out what should be in them, when, more importantly, perhaps when should they be implemented. And David's going to be doing some input into a Cranfield seminar on that in the near future. So, often, seldom, never. Still a lot of folk never using soil management plans, which I find a little surprising and a little worrying, but hopefully today will have prompted you to think a little bit more and do a bit more research as to sort of how they might be important to your particular projects or clients, contracts, etc. Right, shall we go to the Q&A? I'm assuming that it is all in the questions and answer stuff and that people haven't been throwing stuff into the chat too much, but I'll leave you to manage that. I'll do my best to answer what the questions are, but
Okay, no problem, Jonathan. Thank you very much. So we have a question here from Melanie.
yeah.
Are there examples of or model policies for inclusion in local plans in England?
Yes, so the Lancaster Soils Task Force last summer published a model local plan policy. The Lancaster group is based at Lancaster University, but it includes things like Warwickshire District Council, Cornwall County Council, and various other groups and partners. And they have developed a local plan policy, model local plan policy that Cornwall and Warwick have been trying to use. So yes, there certainly are model policies out there. I'm also working with planning officers across the country in terms of planning officer groups, potentially to develop planning conditions. And this is not just in England's situation, but I'm talking to folk up in Scotland and stuff as well, who are part of our SANS group, as to sort of sustainable management of soils in terms of planning conditions that could be incorporated. And there's two views on that. One is that you need a separate condition to prompt people to change the way they've historically done things. And the other one is can we make more use of including soil management as part of conditions that cover construction environmental management plans, for instance, which perhaps in some ways interlink those environmental issues and ecology issues and, management of drainage and runoff and all those sorts of stuff. Is it better placed within one of those sorts of conditions as an element of a KEMP? But yes, there are certainly model planning conditions out there and model planning policies out there. And I point you to the Lancaster Soils Task Force, which has got a report on their website and the model planning conditions and a report of the launch event that I went to last year in London when they launched that model policy.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Right.
So anyone else got any questions, please pop them in the chat. We do have a little bit more time to answer those. So if I'm totally new to this, Jonathan, what do you think would be the first piece of information I should go to read to gain some good insight of what I perhaps haven't really thought about before, but maybe should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things I could point you to. Landscape Institute did a fantastic. They did a whole journal edition on soils a little while ago. Actually, I can send you the link for that if I can find it. But that I thought was a very good sort of expose and discussion and debate about how important soils are from their sort of point of view, and I thought that was really, really helpful. As I say, BSSS last year did a document on the use of soils in construction and development, which was quite a sort of handy, quick thought piece. So if you wanted an introduction to what should we be thinking about, what are the key topics, that might be a good one to go to. The Lancaster Soils Task Force report that was done in about 2021, I think, is an excellent piece to read. And they also produced a sort of quick layman's guide to managing soils on construction sites, which talked about things like compaction, contamination, permeability, runoff, and that sort of stuff. So those are useful. The SANS reports themselves, the SocEnv Soil and Stands Group report from 2021, 2022, 24, again, explore these issues in a bit more depth and, create the challenges that we ought to have. And there's Sustainable Soils Alliance is obviously doing things and pushing particularly government and major land use owners and those that interact with our food security a little bit more to think about sustainable soil management. So worth looking at the Sustainable Soils Alliance website too. I think Lancaster has literally last week just implemented a new grouping alongside Sustainable Soils Alliance to sort of look at research needs in this area. And I would really point you to the Lancaster Soils Task Force as being one of the leading lights in soil management. Of course, Clare, the organisation that I partly work for, has got the definition of waste code of practice, soon to be called the Soil Passport Scheme, and hopefully at some stage in the next year or so issued as version 3 of that. Working with the regulators and government to try and promote the sustainable use of soil resources rather than using surplus from construction sites as just disposal material. So worth looking at our website. There's some videos there. You can come on additional courses to learn more about the DAOCOP or Soil Passport Scheme. And also other risk management elements of land quality. Really good training courses on things like soil and asbestos in soils, for instance. So I'd sort of recommend those to you. But yeah, there is a lot out there now, so much more than there was a few years ago. Obviously, the leading lights in terms of agricultural settings, you've got the horticultural universities, Harper Adams and others. You've got Cranfield, you've got Lancaster. So many are doing really worthwhile work. Plymouth is doing a huge amount of work in soil, and we're involved. Claire was involved with them and the Eden project a few years ago in a European funded project called Recon Soils, which was about maximising soils and learning from the experience that the Eden project had down in Cornwall of taking a China clay waste and trying to make a growing matrix out of that was appropriate for all the different type of plantings that they needed to do associated with the Eden project, and learned some really useful lessons in terms of what you need to do to make a growing matrix healthy and functional for different types of planting schemes and different environments and habitats that are required within their wonderful different structures. If you haven't been to the Eden Project, do take the opportunity to go if you possibly can, because it's just amazing they do what they've done there. And I think that they're now in the process of building the second one, aren't they? Somewhere up in the north. So that would be fantastic to see that come to fruition as well. Although I gather it's been sort of slightly downsized a little bit, as so many of our mega projects have to be. But just an example of that is High Speed 2, at least the first phase of it, has used materials management plans to more sustainably use its soils, and they learned some really good, useful lessons there about thinking about soils early on in the project, thinking about the quantity that they would get from like the tunneling work that was being done. And one of the benefits of the project that sort of just sits around Colnbrook and the big tunnel that runs there across the Chilterns is that they've been able to create a new artificial chalk grassland in and around Colnbrook at the tunnel portal entrance. And that is a significant plus for habitat, because obviously chalk grassland is something that is a at-risk habitat. and to create new opportunities for chalk grassland species to be evident elsewhere in a particularly managed situation. Right next to the M25 is a really fantastic habitat creation opportunity. So yeah, I recommend that to you. And I think there's a case study floating around somewhere on the chalk grassland that was created by that particular project. So yeah.
Yeah. And that is important. And it goes back to the question right at the beginning, really, doesn't it? About thinking about your soil and, if you are having to move it from site, where are you going to move it to and what can you do with it actually to make a difference elsewhere? Um,
Yeah, it's very much thinking, even before you do your sort of master plan of what you want your development layout to be, is what soils have you got? What
mm,
interaction with the development will be beneficial to both the development and the existing soil? And then how can you work around that where you need to work around it in terms of, utility works, foundation works, construction itself? How can you best work around your soils to achieve those ends beneficially rather than just going, we're going to do this development, this is the layout, we'll understand the soils later. If we dig them up and have to get rid of them, we'll dig them up, get rid of them, so on and so forth. So it's been really, it is taking that thinking process further back to what we call the Reba stage 0 or 1, rather than thinking at it at Reba stage 4, 5, or 6, which is so often the case in management projects. And even things like the revision of the Highways 600, which is quite often referred to in soil management as the sort of benchmark for managing soil materials or excavated materials up and down a major highway, for instance. Those are increasingly referring to the sustainable development goals and talking about sustainable management, reusing materials on site. If you're going to reuse materials, then you have to understand those materials. You have to understand what you're trying to achieve with those materials, and particularly the interaction with planting schemes and ecology. And I was fortunate before I moved down to Devon, I lived up in Surrey, just next to the A3, and to watch the development of the Surrey Heaths there at Wisley and the new green bridge that's been put across the A3 as a habitat connectivity between the sort of separated heathlands that were created by the M3 and the A3. It's really good, and within weeks, if not earlier, of the bridge being completed and the initial landscaping being done across it, wildlife is using it as a connectivity, safe connectivity between different heathlands. So that will benefit the heathlands, and it will benefit the wildlife, and it'll benefit us as we have the opportunity to observe those things. So there's all sorts of management, but again, soil management and habitat management and vegetation management around that major highways infrastructure job of redoing the junction on the M25 there was critical. And it was, the people who did the soil management side of things were a critical part of that project in achieving the environmental outcomes that are going to be achieved by what's been done there, as well as put in better flow for traffic.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Seems our listeners and people on a webinar today very quiet in their questions. So
Well, that's a shame. That's a shame. But if people think of other questions afterwards, by all means, let them email you and you can push them on to me and I'll try my best to answer them subsequently. But I know I've tried to pack an awful lot into that webinar. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of things to relate to and go and look up further. But from the poll results, I would sort of perhaps indicate that, yes, we do need to know more. We do need to understand better. We do need to collaborate better. We do need to understand the tools that are available out there and the management schemes that are available to help us do our jobs better. And I would just encourage everybody, step out of your silo a little bit, look laterally, look at cooperating with others, and ask some questions. And if you haven't got ready answers, then go mining for the results that you need.
brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Jonathan. Melanie said that was really useful, and she's going to go and read the Lancaster Task Force information to
Brilliant.
inform their emerging local plan in West Oxfordshire. So
Okay.
that's
And
brilliant
Melanie,
news.
if I can just say to you, representing Claire for a minute, we do run free training for planning officers. I don't know where West Oxfordshire fits in, but I know I've got 2 planning officer events coming up in Redhill and Winchester over the next few months. for planning officers, both in terms of mineral and waste planning, but also in terms of development planning. So if you're interested and I work closely with the Southeast Planning Officers Group as well, but if you're interested in Claire coming to do a talk about the Soil Passport scheme to you as planning officers, where there's a lot of interaction, more than happy for you to get in touch directly with me on jonathan.atkinson@clare.co.uk.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your days, and we'll speak soon. Thanks
My
very
pleasure.
much.
Thanks very much for hosting it. Really nice to take part.
Take care.
Bye all.